we start now? Not now.
Hello, everybody. We are live. Welcome to, we're on episode 5, I believe, of the new year here for Esports and Coffee. It's going to be a fun one today. Our topic today is on eligibility. Again, we are all within the collegiate realm at this point in time, so that's where the majority of our conversation will lie. I am sure we may dabble in other areas, but collegiate's where we're focused. Hello, I am AJ. With us today, we've got. Oh, thank you for following MTU Esports. MTU Esports, thank you for the follow. We've got Jackie, we've got Danielle, we've got Katie with us tonight as we talk about collegiate esports. A little bit of housekeeping. While we guys have you now, follow us on Twitter if you are not following us yet. Also join us in the Discord server. We've got a bunch of additional activities and things for you guys to participate in the Discord server, where we have different activities such as you want to get healthy? Do you want people to help cheer you on in your health, fitness goals, and journeys? We've got areas for that. Help Tip Yourself Thursdays, we got areas for that. If you just want more good people to help support you, it's a great area for that.
If you've had a bad day, if you've had a good day, if you've had a day.
Getting your water down.
We got people for that. All right.
Who completed their water goals today?
This is my first water.
This is mine.
Does Bigby with Boba count?
I've had a lot of coffee.
I'm at 11 a.m., so we're not doing too good.
No.
That's the best is when you can see it.
This is 5 a.m.
Mine
is 5 a.m.
No. I need this. This is a hydro flask.
No, I like
yes.
that one because you can put
The
all the
light
water
would
for the day in
distract
there.
me. I'm gonna be real. I already need distractions while I work. Like I need to be doing something. Task switching. Apologies. I almost caught myself in
What?
Multitasking doesn't
Yes.
exist. True multitasking does not exist. It is only task switching.
What? Since when?
Why did you have to
That
get
has-
all freaking
been a-
sciencey
I'm
on
sorry.
us?
Anyway, so we have a very spicy topic
old.
today, and if you don't like spicy food, that's totally cool. But definitely a hot topic that I think all of us have really awesome takes on. And again, if I may, just a friendly reminder that it's okay to disagree. It's okay to have a discussion, but what's not okay is to flame and be disrespectful to people and their opinions. So some of us may disagree. Some of you may disagree with each other or with us, and that's totally fine. The key here is that we're sharing all of our perspectives and experiences that might come along with it. So just friendly reminder, especially with this, with any topic, frankly, but especially with this one. So friendly reminder with that.
And on this show, this is all our own opinions too. We're not representing anyone else except ourselves.
Katie,
looking at logos on our
cover
shirts.
Yeah.
Oh wait, hold on. Let me just wait. Let me
We're
just
just
really
gonna.
fast.
Oh no.
Wait, let me just.
Let me. No.
Sit down, Katie.
Oh.
So today we are going to talk about. Let's talk about the eligibility of esports. I guess maybe let the most difficult eligibility school kick it off, and that would be me. So we follow at the school that I do not currently represent on this stream. All of the same eligibility rules as traditional athletics. And the difference being,
And what are those?
yeah, that's
Okay.
so there are various rules like a 24 credit hour rule, which means going in from freshman to sophomore year, the students would have had to complete 24 credit hours to be eligible to go into the next year. And then 48 hours the following year, and so on and so forth. They cannot, it's the same as NACE rules and probably others that you can't drop below full time, whatever your institution does. But traditional athletics is 12 credit hours. You have to remain full time. You have to remain This one's an interesting one, but it's not that you have to keep a 2.0. You have to have a 2.0 by your junior year, actually. So there's a lot of room there. And then, for instance, transfer credits, if a student is transferring, they would have to have a certain amount of transfer credits to even be eligible. So if I get somebody, say, in the spring and they only took 2 classes, let's say they did full-time year semester 1 and then 2 the next year, if they didn't fall between the credit hour rules, then they couldn't compete. Also, here's the one that's a bit of contention is we only get 4 years of eligibility, which is actually sorry, it's 10 semesters of eligibility. So it's not just years, which would arguably be the 5-year rule.
And I
But
don't think summers don't count, yeah. I
correct.
think summer. Okay, it's I guess fall/spring semesters.
What they count for credit hours, like if a student fails a class, they can take it in the summertime to
Mhm.
make up for it. But it doesn't count like if it doesn't count in the 12. There's not doesn't count in the 12-hour like rule. So you couldn't
Mhm.
take 2 classes in the summer and then take only
Right.
3 in there. So it just has to do with credit hours. There's other various rules that are really
Okay, I have a
more
question.
difficult. Go ahead.
So, as you built this program from the ground up, did you make that rule or did the school require you for those rules?
Well, if I knew now, or if I knew then what I know now, I was not at the beginning aware of a large organization's stance on esports with someone operating in the same building as them. If you can't put that together. So I was not aware that that large organization would likely not start pursuing esports. So in my mind, originally when I started, I met with my boss and I said, "Hey, what are the rules? What are the requirements?" We sat down and talked about it. And the thought was, I mean, I'll say it. The thought was if the NEIA ever took on esports, that this would be a very easy transition if you just start it from the beginning. And I don't dislike the rules. It's just sometimes difficult. So like for instance, if I have a walk on that went to community college and has never competed in esports and now we're holding them accountable and they only have like say 1 semester left of eligibility because they went to school for 9 semesters at whatever community college for say nursing and now they want to go for engineering, it creates a little bit of a problem because traditional athletics you wouldn't have any eligibility because you already spent it. But how can you hold students that never competed in traditional athletics accountable to that level if they've never had those restraints? Like,
Mm.
think AJ did. I think all of us competed in high school sports.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we all had to sign the NCAA clearinghouse rules, which gave us eligibility based on how many semesters we competed and such. And they may have changed since I went versus Katie. Some variation, but basically, if you went a certain amount, you could continue to compete. So if you competed, and originally it was like if you competed 1 year, you could only have 1 year of eligibility, etc. Um, but if they never signed those and those things were adapted, how at that point do you hold them accountable? Um, so the difficult problem is once I'm in this pigeonhole of following traditional athletic rules, um, how can I try to like explain to athletic directors, dean of students, the president that all these things um, shouldn't happen, but it's only going. And their argument was, well, it's only going to affect the walk-ons. Um, since you started the program, it's not going to affect the students that like if I'm recruiting right now, it's not going to affect the students that are coming in right now. It's just going to affect the current students.
I think one of the biggest things about my question was that you're specifically not just creating random rules yourself. Like your
No.
school has obligations and eligibility requirements that you are trying to adhere to as much as you can.
Yeah, these are
Can't hear
actually
you. Can't hear you, Katie. Can't hear you, Katie. You're
no. Shh, it's okay.
I'm assuming you're, Jackie. Are you kind of implying like that you're not just pulling out? Oh, I'm deciding what eligibility means. It's there. There's a basis for it
yeah.
in
Yep.
other successful fields, i.e., traditional sports.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, they were all established for a reason, and along the way, I mean, I'm arguably a little bit new into traditional athletics, not collegiate athletics, not traditional athletics. So they're all in good reason. It's all to the, even though it seems crazy, it's all to the benefit of the student. If you look at the track, it's literally to get them there and get them graduated. Um, and that they can't live in this world of, I'm going to keep going to school full time and have 10 years of eligibility because I'm Tom Brady. And I'll use him as an example just because they would have used those D1 schools would have used these football players if they could have. So there's good reason that they're that way. The only problematic part of these rules, for instance, like the NAIA and NCAA rules, is like if you compete in prize pools or like pro teams, you are deemed ineligible. Now the NCAA has since made different rules and changes, and I'm not completely familiar with it, but I started reading the 35 pages of the NAIA procedure, which is a real page turner. Um, and sorry, my computer really wants to restart. So if I disappear, I apologize. Like it is
Goodbye.
yelling at me. Like, no. So no, it's not rules I made up. I'm not gonna make up rules. I'm not it's if we leave it up to the person, then they're I mean, I want to say everybody has integrity, but no. Sorry.
So our rules aren't like as steep as that. Our eligibility, we have like a set standard, like 4 rules, 12 credits, 2.0 GPA, um, in good standing with the school, and in good standing on your NA game account. And I didn't create those myself either. When I first started this position, I Doc from Boise State had just shared his player handbook in the NACE Discord. And I took that and then I met with our athletics, even though I'm not under athletics, our eligibility officers and our student handbook. And I curated it off of everything. So while I still made decisions for our specific program, I based it off of what the school already had. And the worst part is when a student comes to me like, well, I don't have the right amount of credits. I'm like, sorry, you can't compete this semester. I've had to deny a couple students or they just had to wait. And that's the most heartbreaking is when they aren't eligible because of either enough credits or they're not in good standing. And that I think that's the worst part.
Yeah.
Yeah. I I think that the as strict as these like in 5 to 10 years, I think this conversation will be kind of obsolete because I could honestly, I'm not going to speak for NACE. Again, the views and opinions coming out of my mouth do not reflect the organizations. However, knowing that NACE operates out of the NAIA and the attention for like eligibility and those things, I could see them moving in the direction of that because the 13 people watching minus the 4 of us, 5 of us if we count Sari, those are people checking your eligibility by hand. I need you to understand that the NAIA and the NACE, or not NACE, sorry, the NAIA and NCAA are doing it all electronically. So these are people that are going through all of your students by hand, and then we're self-reporting, which you could self-report a lie. And I'm sure out of, let's see, we all have um, operations. Does open up by hand too? Yeah. So like all of these things are done by hand, and eventually it would be nice for instance, NACE. I'm not going to speak for the other organizations because I am not a part of those. I presume they're doing them by hand too. But with NAIA, I know that they have to fill out. I've seen the screen They have to fill out specific stuff and submit specific documents to prove that they are actually indeed a student. So it's kind of like a cross check.
Official transcripts. Our Apex team just had to do that for a tournament. They had to submit unofficial or like screenshots or like an unofficial transcript or whatever. And at any point, they had, if the, I guess like TO or moderator deemed that they wanted like an official or whatever, that essentially they would just be in contact with the registrar, and the registrar would send over like what they needed.
Oh, and the other thing is my students have to remain eligible. So like I literally just had to bench two people because they don't have the GPA to sustain competition. And yes, that will end me getting a win, but it's winning is not the most important thing. It's more about, again, they're a student athlete, and the first word in that is students. So whether it's going to cost you a championship, I know that a lot of these I presume, I don't want to say I know because that's when you get in trouble for saying facts, but um
Mhm.
I presume that a lot of these competitions don't, after they submit their eligibility, they don't have to follow through and
Mhm.
check if they're still eligible. Um, and that's why you have entire eligibility departments at school who checks. Like you can email sports eligibility at myuniversity.edu, and you'll have the kids have to do that. They have a lock on their registration. They have early registration, priority registration, and they have a lock. So like they, even if they're taking 18 credit hours, they can't just drop a class. They have to
Mhm.
email sports eligibility and ask to drop that class.
Mhm.
So it's crazy strict.
So
But that's go
let's
ahead.
get in. Let's just get into that a little bit. So, your opinion? Do you think that if a student drops a class halfway through, or even at the end of the semester, should they still be eligible to compete in playoffs and grand finales?
Well, if they drop at the end of the school year, then they're probably ineligible the whole school year. So
Not
no.
no. So like within the last like month of school, because that's
Well, let's
usually
put a
right before
put a
playoffs.
timeline. Put a
Like,
timeline. So let's
Yeah.
say April
yep.
1st. So right now, April 1st is, let's just, for lack of a better word, NACE Grand Finals, and playoffs are happening now. April 1st is the Grand Finals. And on April 3rd, which would be the Monday, a student from, say, Michigan Tech's playing in it. My student dropped a class and dropped below full time. Or on March 31st, they did that. Or the week of, they did that.
Nope. I do not think that they should be allowed to compete.
I agree.
They wouldn't be allowed to compete in traditional athletics. Now, there is a rule for freshmen that gives them a little bit of room. So they only have to pass 9 credit hours, I think, year 1. It's crazy. It's crazy low. So it gives them room, but they have to they have to make it up within the certain amount of time.
Yeah.
So no, I do not think that, because you were not that's the same as like soccer or any traditional athletic team. You dropped out of class and you are should not be eligible to compete, even if it's the best kid on your roster.
Now, do you think that that works in every scenario? So, say for example, so I'm sure at all of our institutions there are, uh, I'm trying to think of like things that the dean of like accommodations, for lack of a better word, that the
Let's
dean of students has made for specific scenarios. And I'm not going to go into death, whatever, mental health, whatever. So, say there was a scenario that sort of justification caused them to drop a class, but they have excusal from the dean of students or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's an outlier though.
So a
If
case by case
yeah,
contingency
if we're
eligibility.
just focusing on grades and
Mhm.
being the issue, if we don't include outliers where
Mhm.
um I was diagnosed in the middle of the semester with ADD, and now I take medication and now I'm
Mhm.
functioning and I'm laser focused, but I have an excusal from the dean of students. I take
Mhm.
that out of the scenario and we're just literally
Mhm.
talking about a student who's like, yeah, I didn't go to class and I failed.
Right.
No, they should not be competing and they should be
Mhm.
held accountable, because again, They're
Mhm.
student athletes, and our sole
Mhm.
job is to
Mhm.
make them better people. And you're their mentor, and you are trying to get them graduated.
I was just
Uh,
gonna say, and we just answered this. Well, if a student has so many issues in the Dean Waves classes, should they even be competing? I don't think that they should.
no, I don't. I
Um,
don't think so either. But if it's like, I mean, it's so many. So, if let's. I want to use autism as an example because I
Well, you
can.
can use an event like a family, like a family member passing away, and say for them to remain in school, say they're on scholarship, a family member passed away, and for them to essentially remain quote eligible, like you're not going to pull their scholarship. Frankly, if you
No.
do, you're freaking heartless, right? But say to maintain their student athlete, something's worked out, or maybe they attend 3 out of 4 practices or 2 out of 3 practices, maybe one of their classes, the dean, like everything's worked out with the dean of students, but the situation is that is helpful for it is more beneficial to their mental well-being, maybe with workouts or study tables or whatever, to continue participating versus if that was taken away, that might have more detrimental effects.
I don't disagree that they should be, if the dean of students or whoever the powers that be say you should be allowed to remain a part of the team. If I'm looking at my former boss, I would assume he would say that, but I would probably not have them compete at that point. And just participate in, like you said, study tables, workouts, practice time, still be active. I'd probably even potentially, if it's a waiver, bring the student with, and I'd just be like, hey, but at that point, you shouldn't, like, your rosters should not be so small that you don't
Mm-hmm.
have anyone to sub those people. Speaking from somebody who does have a team that's not able to sub anyone, like it puts you in a really hard spot, and you don't
Mm-hmm.
want to do that to the, like, we'll use uh I'll use Smash. That's because they have the highest GPA, so I'm going to use them. Say I had only 4 Smash players and one of them was failing. Then if I take them out, then it screws over the other 3 that are getting good grades. So you shouldn't, your rosters should not be that small that one person is going to affect the whole lineup. I mean, that's why you have depth charts on traditional athletics.
I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to get into that topic just yet, maybe, but also at the same time, I think
Mm-hmm.
so many of us worry, and I've spoken to other directors about this at NACAD in Iowa. They're so worried about eligibility or issues happening because they might not have a sub, so they just let it slide. They're like, if we didn't have this one student playing, then we didn't have enough to participate, so then we have to forfeit our match. It's like, where does that line stop? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's are you serious? Like, they're not eligible, or they cross a line that makes them ineligible, and you're still gonna let them participate just to play? Like,
So if I'm gonna answer comment on
Eugene's.
Eugene's and then say what you say because it kind of can go to both. Yes, I know that sometimes your roster size is not in your control. At that point, maybe you look coming from a small private university. If I can manage to get a few subs, they might not be high ranking at all. Like literally, I probably could beat them. And I love you all. Don't be mad at me if you watch this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I, but it's not like one bad egg spoils it for the bunch, and that leads into what you're saying. At that point, it's your integrity and what are you teaching the group as a whole. If they find out, if the person, because I don't, FERPA, you're not allowed to tell them that you're ineligible, but they can infer what they want if you turn around and say, sorry, you guys can't compete. Usually for mine, I think I am pretty open that they are telling each other what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because I guess maybe I'm holding them accountable and trying to have that, which is still up to the student. But for
Mm-hmm.
instance, if the student is like, hey, by the way, I'm failing 4 out of my 5 classes, and then I let them compete the following week and they told their other team, what does that teach the team?
mm-hmm.
That winning's more important than my feelings about their academic progress.
I think we have to get away from the winning is more important.
I
And that's-
think, yeah.
Sorry, competing is more important.
Well,
Yeah.
I think people, again, for all of us, and there's a lot of programs out there that you know, you can say all you want that academics comes first, but by your actions and you know, things that other things that are telling of your either behavior or words, that is not true. And there are programs out there that winning is everything and academics is second, and there's programs out there that academics is first and winning is or competing is second. It is you as a director and your program, your decision on how you run your program. To me, academics are always and will be second to everyone is human and you are a human being, and like that's just kind of a baseline of like just general well-being stuff. But academics is first, which has always been how we've run our program. However, like there are many programs that I know of. I respect them. I respect that they run their program that way. I just disagree with it.
Mhm.
And I will continue to disagree with it, and I will push, you know, whether it's rules, regulations, whatever, like I will continue to push the message that I believe that academics should be first in higher ed. Personally, I will continue to push that. But we do need to acknowledge that those programs exist and they will continue to be successful, and that is just what it is. But at the end of the day, that respect and reciprocation needs to be returned to the other schools that put academics first through words and actions. And so there's one example, kind of what Danielle was saying with like FERPA and not being able to reveal, is the sense of self-responsibility. We do drug testing. That's a requirement of being a varsity athlete. That's a requirement of our department when we do internal drug testing. And they're all fully aware of that when they sign on board. They understand the expectation. If a student is essentially found with whatever it is, let's say it's weed, which is against our student athlete code of conduct, there are consequences. Now, I'm not going to go out and be like, this person failed their drug test, because number one, that's shitty right off the bat. Number two, I legally can't do that. And so if their teammates are like, well, where are you at practice? And they're DMing me or, you know, Chris, or that's on their teammate to tell them, hey, I failed my drug test. I can't be there. It's the same sort of like, hey, I'm not
Accountability.
doing well in school. I failed a class. Like, I can't compete. And if the student doesn't want to take responsibility, like Danielle said, like, what are we teaching them? Because later in life, you know, projecting and blaming outside and external factors is only going to get you so far. At some point, people are going to be like, okay, you can't take responsibility. So we want to teach them responsibility. But we also want them to understand it's okay to mess up. I've had students come to me and say, I am not doing well this semester. I'm going to all of my professors' office hours. I'm talking to my TA. I'm going to get a tutor. Like, I might fail this class, or I might not do well on this exam. And my first response is there anything I can do to help? Is, you know, you've talked with your professor, like, have you talked with our NCAA compliance associate athletic director? Like, you know, have you done these things? And if the answer is yes, I genuinely have, then my response is, okay, where does that put them, like, eligibility wise? Number one. Number two, are you going to retake the class? Like, what's the next step of, hey, here's my plan for next semester. I'm taking less of a credit load. I'm taking 12 credits and I'm going to retake the class. I'm going to take this class over the summer. Like, so teaching them, okay, you failed. What did you learn? How can we move forward with it is important in actually making sure that they learn from it. But a lot of times that's the step that's missing is, okay, you messed up, so what? It's just, I messed up, and then there's no learning or no consequences. And so they continue to think my actions do not have consequences.
Mhm.
I can
I think-
continue to do this thing.
I think that's another thing, that when someone is looking to get into these positions, exactly what you just said is that you're there for your students, and then they should be able to come to you and you're offering assistance for maybe that they are not comfortable going to someone else to offer the assistance. You're going to actively try to help and find them assistance on campus, but then you're also going to make a decision if it's going to be beneficial for them to stay on the team, maybe take a week or two off. Like, you're actually trying to help them to move forward with their education.
Mhm.
Yeah, I actually, leading into spring break, made the decision to cancel 2 of our practices for one of our teams and literally focus on school. And the expectation is during that time you were studying, you were going to, we call it the AAC hours, study tables for Katie. But they, that was the expectation because like she said, I am meeting with my students and I said, have you done X, Y, and Z? Was there, are you meeting with the tutor? Have you talked to uh, this person on our roster who is really good at Calc 2? Have you talked to, have you decided to reach out to have a tutor? Did you start by like actually turning in your assignments and talking to your professor and being open with them and say, hey, I'm on a varsity team. What can I do? Because I really messed up. And guess what? They'll probably help you if you take that initiative. If you don't take that initiative and keep doing that behavior, they ain't gonna help you. And that's so you're kind of teaching them follow through and understanding that you can step and be like, hey, I made a mistake. I messed up. And that's okay. Especially, I give a lot of room to freshmen because it's a huge transition. You know, you were being policed, so to speak, by your mom and dad. You come here and nobody's watching you. And part of like even with students who are wanting to leave the team because they feel that their grades aren't making it or they don't know if they can juggle the stuff. I pull back practice hours and I say, hey, I am all for you leaving the team, but if you leave the team, I can no longer see your grades. And therefore, then it's completely on you to produce this your grades, get better grades. So if you stay on my roster, I can still keep an eye on you. If you don't want that, that's fine, but just be mindful. And actually, oddly enough, they've stayed on my roster just so I could keep an eye on them. I've had one where they ultimately decided to leave after that, but uh, at the end of the day, the life lesson that they're actually going to look back on in 5 years is, hey, somebody cared about me enough to pay attention to what I did. And even if it pisses them off because they can't compete, because they can't play in their game tonight, but you had to sit them because they're failing a class, they'll understand long term that it's just that immediate anger because you're their mentor, you're the hard person. Like actually Jono said, the intention is to make good people and give them a belonging, and these are the parameters. You know, your kids thrive off a routine.
I had
That's the first rule of parenting.
Our first semester we had League of Legends, like our very first semester, and the next semester a student wanted to focus on TFT. Well, we didn't have TFT, and so he just kind of was a sub, not really for a league, but he was just there. And then the third semester he didn't want to come back because he needed to focus on school. He just came back. This is his final semester. I'm so happy for him. He's one of our top players. He just came back and he's graduating this semester. But he took the time to get his grades up to focus on school, but then was still able to come back. Like he recognized that he needed to take that break, but then still came back when he was able to. And that's, I love students when they're able to recognize that themselves. Like I just need a semester off. I have a League of Legends player coming back next semester that took a year off. So I can't commend them enough for realizing they need to focus on school because it does take a lot of commitment to be part of these programs. And some students don't realize that when they're coming in. It's not just casual play anymore. The commitment is up to 20 hours a week, and it's dedicated and it's weekly, and it's stressful.
I think recognizing too, finding those models in your program who are like those model students, like there are people who have some of the best time management skills, and I've learned plenty from them, I think, and there's some in every program. And if you argue that there isn't, you need to pay closer attention to your students, to be honest, because there are always some that maybe they're not perfect, but maybe they have a like Jackie was saying, or Jackie and Danielle, well, everyone was saying, routine. Like that's a big thing. Multiple people have mentioned that. Mention, hey, if someone comes in, like I've had many students come to my office, hey, I'm having issues with this. Whenever I do one-on-ones, I always ask, like, how do you feel the commitment is? Do you think it's too much practice? Do you think it's just right? How do you feel about the number of games? How are your classes going? What are your grades looking like? what's your next semester? And a lot, it'll be a lot of, oh, it's fine. And then once you kind of develop that trust, they're a little bit more forthcoming of, yeah, like honestly, I'm doing really well. Like, this one class is, a little bit of a struggle. And then they kind of start telling you about it. And then it's, well, but I've learned to time manage better. Or I was involved in 3 other clubs. And then I decided that this club, I wasn't getting a lot from it. I wasn't enjoying it. So I took that off of my plate. And now I feel more balance. Or I'm working out an extra day with this group or whatever. Like, getting those ideas from the students of how they're managing their time, because I played college sports. I also was basically playing 2 sports at once, co-founded a rugby team, and was playing softball the same semester that I decided to stop playing. And I was in 3 other orgs, and my time management, like, I function best when I have very little time and I have to basically plan out my day. Like, if I have back to back to back to back to back stuff, that is when I am at my highest, like, productivity, which isn't necessarily for other people. Some people need to set aside blocks of time in between their stuff. The whole, my advisor was telling me when she was pregnant, like, it was the concept of, write for 30, you only have 30 minutes, the baby's napping, like, I only have 30 minutes or an hour, and then I got to take advantage of this time, right? But finding out what motivates your students and what works for them and giving them actual practical ideas of things that have worked for other students in your program shows them that this isn't just you saying something, and yes, you can empathize with them, but I think a lot of times students relate better to things that are what they deem as more relatable of, oh, my fellow student athlete who's on the Overwatch team is experiencing this, and this is what they did to make it work. Okay, and they have the same practice schedule as me. They have the same amount of games. Like, they deal with this, the same stuff. Maybe they're even in the same major. And then they can sit there and say, okay, how can I make this work? And if it's not working, maybe we don't have all the solutions, but that's why, we have other people at our school to ask for help. And even if your school maybe isn't as directly supportive, or maybe maybe you're not housed in athletics or maybe student affairs, or maybe you have a very hands-off admin, but like, I feel like it's part of our job as educators and as directors/coaches to ask around, to find those people maybe within our university and be like, hey, I don't know what to do, please help. And if people are just tossing you around, like, you tried. And I think a lot of times people don't want to try because maybe they just think, oh, the student maybe doesn't care. And maybe they really do care. Maybe they don't care, but maybe they really, really do care and just need a little bit more guidance. So don't be afraid to give that to them.
Like AJ said in chat, check-ins. I also worked with check-ins. AJ, what did you I don't know what your check-ins look like. I know I went through every one of my check-ins before spring break and it was insane, but
Oh my gosh.
give us some insight onto your check-ins there, ma'am.
Oh my gosh, yeah, so it was probably something that I wish that I did. I wish that I had the bandwidth to do it more often than I did. But like when it came to like eligibility, like the best that I could do with the amount of time that I had was like every week we got a kind of a printout that was sent to all of the coaches. It had all of your athletes and kind of their grade information, so you could like keep tabs on, one, they're still enrolled in the classes that they told you that they were enrolled in, and two, kind of kept up with the grades. As long as the teacher like put the grades in the grading system, that was always the worst, when the teachers were like, oh, I don't use the online grading system, and then you're like, oh, okay, well that's okay,
Yeah.
great. You make my life a lot easier. So other than like those instances, like the only way that like you could really gauge folks, because I don't know about you guys, but I think it's a Midwest thing, and this was something that I had to learn, like not
All of us
growing
are
up.
in the Midwest.
Yes, not growing up and not living in the Midwest. Sometimes it's kind of hard to read folks. Y'all keep some things close to the chest sometimes. I have found I found that I found that out
We're
sometimes.
very passive aggressive.
Yeah, and maybe I just like wasn't picking up on that because, man, growing up in Florida, like people told you how it was, exactly how it was, and nobody was shy about nothing. So like being able to like have check-ins, and like these actually like they spawned out of like COVID, and like I couldn't see I couldn't see my students, I couldn't see my athletes. So once everybody was told to go home, like our athletics department, we pulled everybody out of competition. Like that was a decision that was out of my hands. Even though I didn't want it to be, that was a decision that was made for me. Once we were pulled out of competition, I was like, there is still something that I need to do to like keep the program together, keep the athletes together, and like try to sprinkle some joy into their lives at that point in time. So I tried to meet with them during COVID at least once every other week, and it was like just a 15-minute, hey, how are you doing? How are you doing? Because COVID times be crazy times. Um, and I tried to keep that up even after like things got back to normal and we were back on campus. And it really was. It turned out to be more eye opening than I thought it was going to be, because it was meant to be like a, hey, how are your grades going? How are your classes going? Are you still enjoying your major? Is this like still a direction that you would like to go in? How do you feel like your team is doing? How are you like progressing in your game? How do you feel like you personally are doing? But sometimes it did kind of spiral into, well, actually, like things at home are not the greatest and it's affecting my schoolwork, or it's affecting like how I am operating within the team. So some of those conversations did turn out to be a lot more eye opening than I really expected them to be. Um, and I do wish that it was something that I could have had more time to do those more often. Like if I could sit down with every single one of my athletes and do that like a 10 to 15 minute once a week, just me and that person, and hi, how are you as a person? Like I feel like that could go a long way. I wish you could have that personal touch every single time.
Man, I went
Mhm.
through all 47 of them and had meetings. If you see my calendar, it was
Woo!
insane.
Yes.
So I actually have game coaches. So I ask them to kind of meet with each one of the students, and then go from there. Now, I'm I think that the trajectory of esports will shift. Um, some of what Katie was saying and AJ, both of you, is in 5 to 10 years, this whole conversation might be completely obsolete, because you'll have that pipeline where students are suddenly held accountable in high school and middle school and understand what it takes to be a part of like a team, because a lot of those life lessons we're teaching now, and it's just really funny to me because I mean I was on a team. I knew that if I didn't pull my weight, granted I was a swimmer, so it was more about relays, but it was a point system for swimming. So if I didn't pull my weight, then I am not going to get my team the point for that. And what if we lose the meet by let's say 6 points, because that's we'll give myself second or third, so we lose the meet by that many points, then it's me that caused that. So
Mhm.
um you're almost being held responsible and accountable, and they're learning that now, which is a very interesting like dichotomy of life, because we all have played traditional sports. So same with the game coaches, some of them haven't and some of them have for me, and it's just making them understand, hey, we're going to hold them accountable. I think I have more fall off from accountability than grades, actually, where
Mm.
they have to show up at X amount of time, but they really just wanted to play video games. They didn't
Mhm.
want to have to show up at this time. So like another thing, if we're not specifically talking about grades, accountability for practice. If you don't show up for
Mhm.
practice, I'm going to remove you from my roster. Jono made a good point in there that he says take off 2 semesters and
Yep.
stay in the club and interact with the team. With me, I don't know about the others in the call, maybe Katie, but I have to fill out paperwork for every single one of the students to put them on my roster. And I have to submit rosters for next year with all their
Mhm.
information to our sports eligibility department. So
Yep.
it's not as easy as removing a person off my
Yep.
roster.
So they get
And
coded. They
yeah,
get
yeah,
coded as student athletes, but honestly, like if we don't do that, it's more work for our NCAA compliance and the registrar, because they get our student athletes get priority scheduling, which seems to
ditto,
be
yeah.
relatively consistent across a lot of schools. So they are coded as student athletes. So like the whole esports sphere of like oh, well, rosters can change, or like, let's just, go back and forth on, oh, let's pull this person in and let's do this and let's do that. Like, that complicates things so much from an administrative standpoint, and people literally do not realize that. And it's really hard to manage, but like, we do front rush, we do
Front
healthy
rush.
roster, like we have stuff that all the rest of the athletes do, and our athletic director has told me, she's like, hey, if some of this stuff like doesn't make sense for your students, like please let me know, we'll try to work around it. And to me, like, Danielle mentioned this at the very beginning of, following NCAA regulations. We talk about this with all parents and all students. They're fully aware like of the restrictions in terms of, normally the most common thing is like hours and GPA requirements, as well as like obviously like credit hours of practice and gameplay, no more than 20 hours a week.
24-week rule. I can't, sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good.
I can't. 24-week rule, Jackie. They can't have practice for more than 24 weeks in a year.
Yeah, it's 20 hours a
Academic-
week, and this is in in season.
I
They're
think
limited.
we follow that.
It's in season, so there's differences between in and out of season. And Daniel, you might have had to do this, and some of you maybe in the stream as well. But we had to do NCAA training for all the coaches and directors, and basically it goes through all of these rules, a lot of which are quote irrelevant, but a lot of the like what constitutes. I forgot what the term is, and I'm kind of embarrassed that I forgot it. But it's hours that essentially are counted and what is not counted. So if the captain of the team says, "Hey, we are doing mandatory practice on Friday," this is not coming from the coach. This is coming from the captain of the team. And if that exceeds the 20-hour rule, that's fine as long as it is, to my knowledge, essentially.
The coach.
Determined by the player, right? Like if the players say, hey, we're all going to get together and do an impromptu practice, as long as it's not the coach saying, hey, everybody has to be at practice, like, and it's essentially the players, like they can do that. But if I say, hey, we're practicing 35 hours a week, that's not allowed. And I have to report our practices and games and stuff, which is why to manage that, we have the 2-league requirement, or the 2-league maximum requirement. So no team is able to compete in more than 2 leagues at the same time. Tournaments are up in the air and totally fine if it doesn't pass the hour rule. Quals, like CRL quals, tend to be a little bit different because those are meant to be like a one-time super long, tournament to see who qualifies. But like, we haven't had any issues.
That's why
in terms of managing.
we use highly recommend when it's out. It has to be above those hours so that we don't get in trouble for that. And it's also, if a student doesn't attend a practice that isn't required, then it doesn't go against them for not showing up for something like that.
The 24-hour week also is only regular season. Let's just say that the reason that these things are placed is not, and you could try to say that it isn't applicable to esports, but I want to address the elephant in the room, that these things are put in place to avoid burnout for students because they need time away. And you think, and you, not you, I don't want to say that, but we have to understand that it is not always to the benefit of the student to compete year round. So for instance, if my team decides they want to compete, like let's use a Smash. If they compete all summer long and they just decide they want to do it, because Smashies are like dedicated guys. But if they want to compete in it, have at it. Just do whatever it is you want. But I'm telling you, take a time off. Like one of the things I always tell them is like maybe just if games are what you love, maybe not play Smash all summer. Play Mario Kart. Play a different game that takes you out of that mindset. But that's why these rules were put in place, because they were finding studies that showed that the athletes were burnt out. So that is applicable, and the study is always there. Already
applicable meaning like there's some nuances of like sports specific of like types of competition and then types of practices and what fall, like a scrimmage, what fall, like those sorts of nuances that are not applicable, meaning like a scrimmage is a practice. Like there's no, that's just what it is, right? The difference between like hours really doesn't like it applies, but on all of that applies. It's more of like some of the sports specific stuff of like when the championships need to occur and when the recruitment like go into like the recruitment period and like all of that stuff, like relevant meaning there isn't anything saying we have to follow it, and it could be relevant and some people could be following a timeline, but they're not right now.
And those ones are more complicated when you talk about recruitment window and time.
Yep.
Like I can't for sure make any, they will not allow me to make any offers. Like, so if I have a junior that I'm looking at right now, and they love Lawrence Tech and they're like, yep, I'm going here. I know it without a doubt. I have no other schools. I've applied. I'm in. I still can't make an offer until that FAFSA opens up. And that's usually what, November? So I can't, even if I'm like, I can give you all the money in the world, it doesn't matter. I can't actually formally offer them anything. And that's, I digress there, but
Well, so we're actually considering, and I was super against this until this like last month. I don't know why. But we're actually considering moving to one semester
Yep.
teams. So instead of having a year-round team, so we're trying to put it in that if they're still going to be considered varsity players year round, but they won't compete under us for one semester specific towards certain leagues. And I think it'll help with the burnout issue. Spring is such a hard time for burnout,
Yes.
and and just students are dropping off like flies all the time, and it's just how do we combat that?
Yeah, Jackie, that's a good.
I'd love to see that.
Last year we gave the option. We started talking about this for our teams. And when we met with every team, I meet with every team in the beginning and kind of middle towards the end of the season, and we kind of just talk about their goals and then just a reflection of their time in the different leagues. And so what we gave the option for every team is, do we want to move towards essentially a traditional sport model of in and out of season? Now, what that means is they can compete year round, and I'm putting this in quotes. They can play in leagues year round. The difference is, for example, League of Legends is probably the easiest, right? So, or I mean, any of the, like CLOL or CBAL, right? So CLOL is spring, right?
Mhm.
And for my league players, that is their important tournament, right? That is their priority. For Rocket League, it's a little bit different because CRL is in what, both semesters, and then we don't even want to talk about CS because that complicates things. But like with ESEA and FACE and all that crap. It's just so many, like, it's kind of like hockey where it like bleeds into both, and it's just the seasons are weird, but that's no one's fault, right? No one's fault. So I gave them the option. I said, okay, so if you do this, my suggestion would be is you pick your primary league and maybe you have a secondary one or you do a bunch of tournaments, but your goal essentially, in my opinion, in season is what every other traditional sport is, and that's to win the championship. Your goal constantly should be, we want to win every game, we want to win the tournament. We want to win the league. Like that is in theory what an in championship season is, right? And out of season, yes, you should still want to win, but maybe the goal is, okay, so we're going to
learning.
maybe focus on, like, maybe we're switching up our our shot caller, right? Maybe we're switching up our in-game leader. Maybe we're going to test that. You still should want to win, right? But it's just maybe everyone's working on mechanics differently. Maybe practice is structured more individually. Maybe, for example, for CS, maybe they're playing on their own ESEA or another team, and then there's 2 days a week of Michigan Tech team practice, which is required, and there's no getting out of it, but it's like there's some more flexibility in terms of what development happens in the out of season. So that's something we have given our teams an option for. Only one team for now has opted for it, but I think it's important to, at least for me, I think that was a really good starting point. I think that was a really good starting point for us, is basically saying, hey, this is an option. We're cool with this option. The thing is, though, is that every team needs to set the responsibility of, if you say in the off season, we're going to practice twice a week, there isn't, I don't feel like practicing today, y'all. Like, there isn't that. Or I have too much homework. It's, you're showing up 2 days a week. Like, maybe it's from 4 to 2, whatever it is, whatever changes need to be made is changed. And it gives them the flexibility of making that decision. And maybe it changes year to year. Like, so props to you, Jackie, for I think working towards that initiative, which I think is important that you sat there and said, I was skeptical of this, because I think that's absolutely fair of like, what does this actually look like? Because if it's done incorrectly, it could do more harm than good from a like a routine or from a responsibility standpoint.
I think we're all working towards the same common goal, and everyone in chat at this point is like, it's for the betterment and what's best for the student. We've arguably, most of us that are in charge of these programs, even if it were only 4 years older than them, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever, you've lived more life than them. And so it's up to you to be the guiding light and make them understand, like, you're gonna reach these barriers and things, and how to navigate that. Like Katie said, I thrive off of being busy, as crazy as my day was, and can't answer certain things. If I have, what do they say? Idle hands is the devil's handiwork, or whatever. Did I say that right, guys? I don't know. So like, I've always had multiple jobs, and I've always functioned at being very busy. So it's teaching them how to navigate, and like you said, burnout, just to turn it back to that instead of being like a curveball, as my brain usually does. We just have to, I think, do a better job, and think at how the student's going to be affected. They might want to win all the money in the world, but what's their long-term effect on having a season that runs for 4 years straight with no off time? Like,
Yeah.
you need downtime. At what point is, like, 1 week is not good, a month is not good. At some point, that's why the NAIA and the NACE have these 24-week rules for burnout, and making sure, like, playoffs don't count. If you make it to a national championship, it doesn't count. Actually really like the timeline that fits with our school, and when the seasons kind of end, because it kind of ends, granted, if we start making it to playoffs, then this doesn't matter, but it still kind of ends before they get into finals, which is kind of like fortunate for us in esports. But obviously, if you don't have the traditional semester schedule, it's not going to work out the same. But I really like that for most of the schools, it kind of ends right there, and it gives them time to, like, decompress and then focus on getting through their finals.
So to wrap it up, this discussion needs to keep happening. And I think the best way for that is through roundtables, through things like we're doing. So if anyone is watching that wants to have a roundtable discussion hosted by ENC, please reach out through our Discord, our email, our DMs are open, and we would love to produce your roundtable about these discussions, because that's where things change. They're not through panels, they're not through presentations, as much as I love sitting on a panel talking. They're through discussions of the people that are in it day to day and are living everything.
And I think it's important to ask questions. Like Jackie, I think especially Jackie and AJ. Like, I think Danielle and I did a lot of talking, which is, no surprise there. But I think what's really important is not only like what topics are brought up, but what questions are asked. Because I think a lot of times what people don't realize is, like, in order to make progress, sometimes you need to ask those tough questions, or like be I don't want to say a reasonable devil's advocate, because that sounds really odd to say, but like, it's okay. I may agree with something Danielle says, but by playing devil's advocate, that doesn't mean that I disagree. It literally just means I'm trying to ask a question to maybe dig at a deeper problem, or to try to adopt a new perspective. So that's what those roundtables, I think, are especially good for, is being able to come to the table and ask those questions. And everybody, I think, here has been in our community, what we're trying to preach is being respectful and open to new perspectives. And I think I've learned so much from these discussions and from this one as well, personally, even though I won't be, in a position any longer. I think it's still important for me to be able to, like, inform my voice of what other people are doing, and what the difficulties and successes are that other people have found, and what they're doing with whether it's eligibility internally, or like what's missing in, like, NACE quote, or like, a tournament or a league that they're trying to put on for college students if there is eligibility concerns. So
I also want to thank the chat. Like, you guys were super active today, and that helps. Kind of, I think we all went into this thinking, well, if it only lasts 30 minutes, then we're good. And here we are. Jackie's cutting me off, so cutting Katie and I off. Jackie's cutting Katie and I off, the chatters. about this, and I think that one of the major things that I find, because the I think the only one here that's in an athletic conference that's honored by athletics, is some of them aren't following those rules. And the one thing I always hear is somebody will say, "Oh, the NAI rules are a nightmare," and by explaining the perspective and the benefit to the student versus the benefit to us as humans, I guess us as our program to just churn and burn students, it makes a lot more sense. And I think conversation, even with Jackie asking those questions, not realizing like she even if she's just asking to keep the conversation going, or asking because she genuinely wants to know to make her program better, like Katie said, it's going to help everybody. I would be interested to see a study done. Katie, you love studies. um Research, to see how many people, how strict their eligibility policies I would be actually interested to see if Bilski's active in the chat, if he's got to follow, if MSU is going to have to follow the NCAA rules, because I would venture to guess they will, because that's what the athletic directors know and understand. But the only, not to go deeper into this conversation, but there are some minor pitfalls that don't like fit together super well. So, but that's for another day, because
Yes.
we're what? Look, look.
We're all out of. Well, we still have so much. Oh,
I got so much water to drink.
I have
I'm
so
not.
much
Oh,
water.
this is coffee.
So much water. Here, let me drink some.
We're all out of water.
Yes, we're all out of coffee.
I am.
We have so much
out of water
left to drink today. You guys are gonna see us post probably sometime next week. We're gonna start kind of Q2 for 2023 topics for esports and coffee. If you guys have any topics that you guys would like us to chat about, join the Discord server, drop them in there. We're still actively taking topics for Q2, so let us know what you guys would like us to chat about. And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Adios, everybody.
We're
Thank
all
you
out
so
of
much,
coffee.
everyone.